walk a mile in his shoes. Anybody ever heard that one?
Yeah.
He said, that way, if he gets mad, he's a mile away and barefoot. Anyway, the history of dogs on the battlefield is a long and heroic one. Evidence suggests that as far back as 4000 BC, the Egyptians used dogs for military purposes. In the Middle Ages, I don't quite know the mechanics of this, but in the Middle Ages, dogs were trained to run into the enemy's camp with fire on its back, shake off that fire, and then scoot out of there to avoid the inevitable scorching that would follow. The first use of American war dogs takes place during the Seminole Indian Wars of the 1830s and the 1840s. During the Civil War, dogs are used as guard dogs, guide dogs, messengers. However, neither the Union nor the Confederacy had any official policy on the use of war dogs. Dogs used during the Civil War were almost all dogs that were brought from home by the soldiers on either side and then put to military use. In line with that, then, I have a Civil War dog story for you. The Battle of Shiloh. Any Civil War buffs in here? The Battle of Shiloh takes place April 6th and 7th, 1862, in Hardin County, H-A-R-D-I-N, Hardin County, southwestern Tennessee. At Shiloh, the two sides will suffer a combined total of some 22,000 casualties, which makes Shiloh the bloodiest battle of the war up to that point. A little more than a year later, of course, what's going to surpass it? Gettysburg. 50,000 casualties at Gettysburg. Well, at Shiloh, one of those casualties is a Lieutenant Lewis Peff, P-F-E-F-F, of the 3rd Illinois Infantry. 2 weeks after the battle, the lieutenant's widow comes to the battlefield. Her goal is to secure her husband's body and bring it back home to Illinois for a proper burial. She scours the battlefield for the better part of the day, no luck. Late in the afternoon, she's out in a remote part of the battlefield, takes a breather, and she sits down, and she's on a big rock, and she's looking out into the distance, looking out into the distance. When all of a sudden, she notices an object moving in her direction. As the object draws nearer, she realizes that that object is actually a dog. As the dog draws nearer yet, she realizes it's her dog and her husband's dog. The dog runs up to her to have a reunion. After a while, the dog breaks loose, and he heads back out into the direction from where it had come. Halfway out into the field, the dog stops.
Yeah.
He turns, looks at Mrs. Peff. He seems to nod his head at her as if to say, "Follow me." And she does. You're familiar with this story. And she does. I love it. She follows that dog, and sure enough, the dog
Finds the husband.
leads that lady right to her husband's grave. Later on, she's talking with members of her unit. I love it when somebody remembers these things. And those guys in the husband's unit will tell Mrs. Peff that dog, folks, laid on top of that grave for 12 consecutive days. So I ask you, is there anything more loyal on planet Earth than the dog? No? Well, okay, so it is then that loyalty combined with the natural senses of smell, hearing, and night vision that makes the dog the ideal candidate for the protection of troops around itself. In terms of smell, the human nose has about 40 million olfactory receptors. Pretty good. The dog's nose, 2 billion. 2 billion olfactory receptors. So that means, on average, the dog can smell things out about 100 times better than the human. You knew that, 2 billion. In terms of hearing, the dog's ear hears at a rate of about 35,000 hertz per second. The human ear barely manages, anybody know? It's 20,000 hertz. It's about as good as we can do. In fact, the dog can hear footsteps directly in front of itself while a jet fighter is taking off next to him. Now the reason for that is the dog has the ability to shut off, close down the inner ear, and focus only on sounds in front of itself. And in terms of night vision, the dog's eye is built to see at night. First of all, has a wider pupil to allow the entrance of all available ambient light. Ambient light is the light given off by the moon and the stars. Then, the rods and the cones in the dog's eye are so arranged as to boost that available illumination. So seeing at night is not a problem for the dog at all. Well, it is then this natural sensory perfection that seems to make the dog, military or otherwise, seems to make the dog clairvoyant or have a sixth sense. And haven't we all seen this with our own dogs at home? Now, in today's military, dogs play a wide variety of roles. Okay? We have patrol dogs, search dogs, scout dogs, tracking dogs, drug detection dogs, comfort and therapy dogs. That's where your labs come in. We had a nice discussion before. Comfort and therapy dogs. They have the #1 use of dogs in Iraq and Afghanistan would have been in explosives detection. So that was their major role in those two wars. The terrorists love to plant these homemade bombs everywhere. They were called, anybody know? Improvised explosive IEDs. Thank you. Improvised explosive devices, IEDs. And those bombs may indeed kill or maim an American military member, which is just what the terrorists want, but sadly, they were just as likely to kill or maim an indigenous civilian. So every time one of our war dogs smelled out one of those bombs, that dog was saving not only American lives and limbs, but native civilian lives and limbs as well. Now, in America's military today, they have some specific preferences, okay? 3 to be exact. #1, they prefer their dogs to be male. And many times when I say that, a lady in the audience yells out, "Yeah, for the aggression." No. All right. #2, they prefer their dogs to weigh not too much more than about 70 pounds, okay? And a picture is worth 1,000 words. I don't know, I'm hoping you'll be able to see this. If you can see this image here, you'll see the handler has his dog on his shoulders. Can you see that all right? I wish I could project it, but the handler has a sworn obligation to get his dog to medical attention should the dog be wounded, rendered unconscious, rendered disoriented, super fatigued, whatever the case may be. That handler has the obligation to get the dog to medical help. So the brass, the high command, felt that they would be lessening the burden of the handler by not being, the dog not being too much more than about 70 pounds, okay? Then they prefer 3 breeds today, but before I even identify them, let me say there are many breeds in service. There are labs, and there are many, many breeds in service. But what I'm indicating here is the preference. What they look for today are 3 specific breeds. #1 would be the Belgian Malinois. We had here before, we had a nice discussion with some folks before the speech, and I was telling, again, giving away my age, during the war, they were known as Belgian Shepherds. And I confessed to this lady, I don't know when and why it became Malinois. Anyway, now it's Belgian Malinois, but in those days it was Belgian Shepherds. And here you see an image of a dog going out the plane, parachuting out the plane with his hand. These dogs, they're amazing. When they're trained, what they can do is amazing. The second preference they have is the Dutch Shepherd. Okay? Anybody notice anything about this dog?
Goggles.
Did you say goggles?
Yeah.
You're wrong. They're doggles. Doggles, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh,
A friend just.
you're fine. They're doggles, D-O-G-G-L-E-S. Doggles, not goggles. And here, wait till you see what's coming out of a car at you.
Yeah.
Huh? I mean, why would anybody tangle? And we're going to come a little. We're going to discuss this just a little bit more here in a few moments. But imagine this coming at you. So the Dutch Shepherd, the Belgian Malinois, I'm sorry, number 1. Dutch Shepherd, number 2, and number 3, always and forever. Thanks, German Shepherd, the good old German Shepherd. And in this image of this beautiful German Shepherd, if you look carefully at his paws, you will see he's wearing a pair of booties to protect his sensitive paws from the, here we go now, the burning sands of Iraq and the equally burning snows of Afghanistan. So that's the three preferences. Again, they use all sorts of breeds, but that's what they're looking for. And I just couldn't resist this one. There's a picture of a beautiful German Shepherd. As you can tell, I'm a dog lover. This beautiful German Shepherd, folks, is recovering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Look at that beautiful dog up there on that 55-gallon drum. But it demonstrates how the horrors of war affect the animal kingdom every bit as much as humankind. And we were talking about this before. Let's see if anybody else remembers this guy. On video. Sorry, and what?